we're gonna open this up, we're gonna compress our base, and we're gonna compress our rim. There are a lot of ways to open up your clay. There are really a lot of ways to throw on the wheel in general, but the techniques that I'm teaching you are very beginner friendly, and I think they're gonna set you up for greater success in the future. And then when you wanna add more advanced techniques later on, you're gonna have a really good foundation to work from. So, the best way I find to open this up as a beginner is to cup your left hand around the outside of your clay. Get your thumb of your right hand somewhere up here on top of your other hand. It can be back here, it can be wherever you want. Connect your hands though. One finger up above your clay, and just lightly touch your finger down to the tip of your clay. You're gonna wait until your finger feels really nice and stable. If I take my finger and I move it off center, it spins because the clay is spinning. And if you spin your way down into your clay, you're probably gonna end up with a thin wall and a thick wall. And your thick wall gets tall and your thin wall stays short. And then you have this lopsided pot. To be honest, when you're starting out, there's nothing wrong with that. I call them organic, and it's totally okay. So, don't give up just because you end up with a thin wall, thick wall. See it through to the end and learn something from it. But the best way to get really nice even walls is to just wait with your finger, wait until it's nice and stable, and when you feel good about it, you can push down a little and make a small divot in the top of your clay. Then you can look at it. You can see, does it look center in the top of my clay? If it's spinning, I can tell it's not centered, and I can take my thumb and I can smooth that out and start again. By just making a little divot, you're giving yourself the opportunity to decide if you feel good about where this hole is going to be placed. But if it looks good, it looks centered, then you can commit to it. Set your hands back in position, put your finger inside the hole, and push into your clay. Don't go all the way down to your bat, or you're going to have a hole in the bottom of your pot. And ideally, if you're making a planter with a hole in it, you're going to add that hole during your trimming phase, not while you're throwing it on the wheel. You want to have a nice strong base to support your walls while you're pulling. So don't go right down to your bat. It can be hard at first to tell how deep you went. If you want, you can use a pin tool to kind of check the depth. But generally what I did was kind of trial and error. I would open this up, look at my base and go, wow, that's thick, compress it down and make it thinner. It's better for your base to be a little thick than too thin. It's harder to get clay back into your center than it is to reduce clay from your center. So use a little bit of caution. It's okay if it ends up a little thick. So now you can see I've made a hole straight into my pot. I didn't pull it, I didn't stretch it, I just established center inside of my pot. So now we're gonna open this up. And to do that, it's a similar technique. Before we were up like this, we had our thumb on top. Now we're gonna have our thumb on the back of our hand here and our finger inside the hole down to the base. So this thumb on the back of your hand is going to be your clamping leverage. So you can clamp your finger directly into your palm. You wanna make sure that you drag the tip of your finger across the base and you use the side of your finger to open up the wall. If you just curl your finger in, you're going to open up the bottom, but you're not going to open up the top. And if you tilt your finger, you're going to open the top, but you're not going to open the bottom. So you really want to use your whole finger. Aim for a flat bottom with a 90-degree edge where it meets your wall. A big wide U shape is also okay, but we don't want a V shape on the inside because then all that clay down at your base is now trapped and you don't have a base on the inside to work with. So, finger in the hole, thumb on the back of your hand, clamp your finger directly into your palm. And you can see that clay just open right up. You don't want to push back too hard with your outside hand. Your outside hand should be firm but nice and soft so that as you clamp, you're not going to pinch too much at the top or force your walls in. So, now that it's open, we're going to compress our base and we're going to compress our rim. I like to start with the rim. I take my left hand, my thumb and pointer finger, I put it on either side of my wall on the right side of my pot. My right hand is going to be over top of that hand, and we're going to put a little pressure down onto our rim. And you can see as it softly rounds out, it's no longer sharp or pointy. This is ideal so that when you begin to pull your walls, it doesn't start out really thin and sharp. You have some thickness there, and you can keep a nice soft round edge to your rim. Think about when you are making a mug or something. If it has a really sharp rim, when you go to drink out of it, it's going to feel unpleasant on your mouth. So you want to make sure that you have a nice soft rim for drinking out of. Also, glaze doesn't really like to stick to sharp surfaces, so it might crawl away and leave the edge kind of rough. So a nice rounded soft rim will hold glaze better. It'll feel better to drink out of. So now that we've compressed our rim, we're going to go ahead and compress our base. You're going to take your sponge. I like to make it look like a little mushroom by just pinching the bottom of it. Now I've got this bulky bit of sponge at the top. It'll cover your fingernails if you have any. And you're going to keep your left hand cupped around the outside for support, and your sponge is going to start in the center of your pot, in the base. You're going to press down and very slowly work that sponge towards your left hand. And then from your left hand, you can go back to center. You're not compressing your walls. You don't need to have the sponge travel up your wall, but you do want to go all the way to your wall and then back to center. So you're making sure you get your whole base. I like to tell my students to picture your mugs and your bowls you have at home. They all have really smooth bases on the inside. If you leave those ridges from dragging open your pot, those spirals from your fingertip, these are all places that can kind of make your pot hard to clean, maybe trap bacteria, and you don't want to get sick. So I like you to try and make your base on the inside as clean and as smooth as possible. This is also a great way to reduce the thickness of your base. So let's say you opened up your pot and you're like, wow, that's a lot of clay down there. Through compressing, you can take some of that clay from your base, move it over to your wall, and then when you go to pull later, you're going to actually have access to it. Any clay under your base is now trapped clay. You can't use it to really get height out of your pot. So you don't want too thick of a base. But you also might want to keep in mind what you're going to do with it when it comes to trimming. So if you're going to want to put a foot ring in the bottom, you might want to leave a bit of a thicker base so that it gives you room to trim down and create that foot ring. If you're just going to make it flat, then maybe you want your base to be a little bit thinner so that you have less work to do when it comes to trimming. Okay. Once your base is happy and smooth, you're ready for the next step, which is pulling your walls.